As our society becomes more connected, it's the role of the designer to facilitate opportunities for isolation. The question is, well, how? But also, why would we want to be alone? Hello creative people, and welcome to Subjective Design, the channel where we will discuss design concepts with the hope that you can use these concepts in your own projects. I go by Alice, and as a Master of Architecture graduate, I have a passion for a lot of these concepts that we'll be discussing because I see how they can affect us in any kind of environment, even when sometimes it might be a digital one or it might just be in our head. The videos, while they're uploaded individually, they're intended to be part of a set of 2 videos with the goal that you will, and I will get a more holistic view on the subject. We'll be looking at isolation, as I'm sure you could tell by the thumbnail. Isolation can be defined as the process or fact of causing a person or a place to be separated from others. At the same time, isolation can be categorized in 2 forms. This is objective isolation, also known as being alone, or perceived isolation, which is just feeling lonely. Well, it's not that surprising that being alone can affect how lonely you feel. What was a bit more surprising to me is that according to a paper published in the National Center for Biotechnology Information's website, the quality of social interactions matters more than the quantity of interactions that you have, which basically just means that just because you're surrounded by a lot of people, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to feel lonely. And I think that before we move forward with this video, I think it's important to mention that the same paper highlights how other reports have found that social isolation can lead to health risks on par with smoking, obesity, sedentary lifestyle, and high blood pressure. Objective isolation can also limit the effectiveness of communication, as you probably notice when you're trying to give instructions to someone over the phone. And it becomes a lot harder than if you were doing it in person because you're not there to see what they see or they see what you're trying to describe. Another example of this is happening with the pandemic, where a lot of people are experiencing Zoom fatigue because they're chatting for too long. Zoom fatigue is interesting to me because I imagine that with features like the gallery view, where you can see all the people that you're talking to at once, the intent was to make it easy to see. But in this National Geographic article, they talk about how by having that gallery view, our brain gets tired from trying to pick up all the little nonverbal cues that people are doing. And since normally we would just pick up on that through body language and through like our peripheral view, it's not really a big issue when you're talking to someone for our brain. But here's the thing, solitude is always seen as a failure to conform to society's rules, and this pressure can actually lead to counterintuitive effects on people, where it prevents, instead of causing motivation for them, it actually might make them feel guilt, and from that comes depression. In extreme cases, this can lead to something known as 𝗃𝗵𝗿𝗄𝗰, which is when people shut themselves away from society in their home and rely on their family members or other people to bring them food or help them with other services that they might need. Well, this is common in Japan with more than 500,000 people. It's actually not something that only happens in Japan, and so people from all over the world are becoming more concerned about this phenomenon, which is in many ways a lot like depression. So what I'm trying to say here is that while these negative effects of isolation are worth knowing and talking about, the social pressure can actually have its own set of negative effects on people. And because of that, the key to beneficial isolation lies on the fact that it has to be voluntary. It has to be something that I want to do. I came across this article called The Emergence of Solitude as a Constructive Domain of Experience in Early Adolescence. And in this article, the author explains how for children, isolation is often involuntary, which means that when they are alone, it's because they're either shy or they've been rejected by their social group. Meanwhile, as people go older, they begin to want to spend time by themselves. Through this and similar resources, I began to notice that there's 3 main benefits that voluntary isolation can have for someone. The first one being mental health, and this is because it can have a positive effect on your emotional state, because when there are less distractions, you are able to meditate and think about your opinion and your behavior. The same article also talks about how voluntary isolation can improve a person's ability to adjust to changes. This is important because when people have poor adjustment, it can lead to anxiety, hopelessness, depression, insomnia, or even a lack of focus. Another major benefit of isolation is privacy, and while this is self-explanatory, privacy gives people the opportunity to relax and lower their guard from the social demand of social expectations. The last major benefit of isolation, and the one that I think is the most interesting, is identity, because the way people usually gain their own identity is through a mixture of experiences that they've had and other people's traits that they've absorbed along the way. While in isolation, people are forced to confront their own ideals and face them without the influence of other communities or criticism. Self-esteem also plays a significant role in how we see ourselves and our social identity, and through self-reflection, people are able to gain a better understanding of themselves. Someone pointed out that as a way to find ourselves, we enroll into communities that align with our interests, and in the process adopt the identity of that community. The science school is a perfect example of this, because before I went to school, for example, I definitely had a different way of thinking or looking at the world, and now that I did, I don't even look at buildings the same way. For now, just picture this. Imagine you work in customer service and you have to deal with an angry customer. When you eventually manage the situation, you head to the break room to take a break. But there, you find your coworker, and he wants to tell you a story about the crazy things that happened last night. You're not that interested. And now that he finally finished the story, you have to go back to work. Later, when the day is finally over, a drunk guy on the train starts chatting with you for the whole ride home. When you eventually make it home, you see your lovely but also highly energetic children. During this whole time, you never got a chance to relax, and now you have to go to sleep, and it's the next day. The point that I'm trying to make with this story is that during this whole scenario, there were several opportunities for designers to intervene and give the character healthy, private, and empowering experiences. But how can designers really help this character? Well, there's many industries that can actually help. Some of them relate to the built environment, transportation, literature, electronics, or even software user experience. When trying to look for examples, I noticed that there was a pattern in the way that designers chose to provide for the user. The first pattern I noticed is escapism, which is when people want to escape the social distractions in their personal or professional lives. This can be seen at the office, where designers continue to argue for the right balance between allowing space for collaboration versus giving people the sufficient privacy to focus. It can also be seen at home, where overpopulation has also created a demand for more dense apartment units, and because of that, there's a higher need for, let's say, acoustical insulation. We also tend to put our headphones on and separate ourselves from the rest of the world around us. The second pattern I notice is about designs that are helping us deal with the changing world. So for this, designers are improving how we interact through online communities or services, so that we can be alone together. Online games and communities are becoming more interactive with the help of VR technology, and while not perfect, apps like House Party give people the social fix that they might need at the time through the use of in-app games. If you go to Kickstarter right now and search for social isolation, you'll notice that there's a lot of products and services that are meant to help people deal with the pandemic. This is actually a great segue for the next pattern that I noticed, which is profiting from that isolation mindset. And I think a great example of this is the music and video streaming user experience design. This is because with personalized content and autoplay features, it makes it easier for us to want to stay in that isolated environment. And I think that self-improvement apps that are made so that you can improve your self-esteem are popular because they help an individual find their unique social identity. So finally, to answer the question of how, I think designers can create opportunities for people to be alone together, to escape reality, and they can provide services and products that can help people with their mental health. Thank you for watching this episode of Subjective Design. If design runs in your veins, make sure you subscribe for more concept discussions. You can also visit my Instagram page for updates and related content. Music for this video was produced by my friend 𝗖𝗄𝗋𝗋𝗄𝗋. Make sure to check out his channel for more original music.